It's a rainy evening. The sky is dark, and thunder rumbles in the distance. A car speeds through the empty streets. Inside, a young African boy named Sam is driving. His face is full of panic and fear. In the back seat, his best friend Jake is unconscious. Jake's breathing is shallow, and his face is pale. Sam keeps looking back at him, shouting, "Hold on, Jake, we're almost there." The car screeches in front of a brightly lit hospital. Sam jumps out, runs to the back seat, and struggles to carry Jake inside. The rain soaks both of them, but Sam doesn't care. He bursts into the emergency room, shouting, "Help! Someone, please help!" A receptionist looks up, startled. She sees Sam, dripping wet, holding Jake in his arms. She hesitates for a moment, then picks up the phone to call the doctor. The other people in the waiting area stare at Sam, whispering among themselves. The tension in the room grows as Sam pleads, "He's dying. Please do something." The camera pans to the hallway as footsteps echo. A man in a white coat, Dr. Thompson, walks toward them. His expression is calm but cold. The scene ends with him standing in front of Sam and Jake, looking at them with a dismissive glance. Dr. Thompson is a well-known doctor in the city. He is skilled at his job and has saved many lives. But behind his professional success, he hides a dark side. Dr. Thompson looks down on people who are different from him. He believes African people are beneath him and doesn't treat them with respect. At the hospital, his behavior is no secret. He often makes rude remarks about African patients when talking to his colleagues. "They come here because they can't take care of themselves," he once said, laughing with a nurse. His colleagues feel uncomfortable, but stay silent because of his position and influence. In his office, his walls are covered with awards and certificates. He takes pride in being a respected doctor, but deep down, his heart is filled with prejudice. He refuses to see all patients as equal. To him, some lives are more valuable than others. This mindset has shaped his actions, creating pain for those who need him the most. Dr. Thompson walks into the emergency room. His face is calm, but there is a hint of annoyance in his eyes. He sees Sam standing there, holding Jake in his arms. Jake is still unconscious, and Sam's voice trembles as he says, "Doctor, please help my friend. He's not breathing properly." Dr. Thompson looks at Jake, then at Sam. His expression hardens. "What happened to him?" he asks, his voice cold and distant. Sam quickly explains, "We were playing soccer and he suddenly collapsed. He needs help right away." But instead of acting, Dr. Thompson steps back. He frowns and crosses his arms. "Does he have insurance? Can he even afford treatment?" he asks sharply. Sam is shocked. He stammers, "I don't know. Please just save him." Dr. Thompson shakes his head. "I can't just treat anyone who walks in. Take him to another hospital," he says firmly. Sam's eyes fill with tears as he begs, "Please, don't let him die. He's my best friend." The people in the waiting room watch silently. Some look angry, but no one speaks up. Dr. Thompson turns away, his mind already made up. Sam is left standing there, holding Jake, his hope slipping away. Sam stands outside the hospital, feeling helpless. The rain continues to pour, soaking him and Jake. His arms ache from carrying his friend, but he doesn't stop. Desperately, he waves at a passing car. Finally, a kind driver pulls over and helps him take Jake to another hospital. As they drive through the storm, Sam keeps checking on Jake, whispering, "Please don't leave me. Stay with me, Jake." At the second hospital, Doctors rush Jake into the emergency room. Sam paces outside, praying silently. After what feels like hours, a nurse comes out and says, "He's stable for now, but we need to inform his family." Sam quickly calls Jake's mother, Mrs. Andrews. She answers in a shaky voice, worried about her son. Sam explains everything, his voice breaking as he tells her how Dr. Thompson refused to help. Mrs. Andrews goes silent for a moment, then says, "I'm coming right away." When Mrs. Andrews arrives, she hugs Sam tightly and thanks him for saving Jake. She looks at her son through the hospital window, tears streaming down her face. Then, she asks Sam to sit down. Her voice is serious as she says, "There's something you need to know about Jake. He's not just my son. He's also Dr. Thompson's son." Sam stares at her in shock, unable to speak. Mrs. Andrews explains that many years ago, she and Dr. Thompson were in a relationship. Dr. Thompson left her. They were happy for refusing to be part of their lives. But when she told him she was pregnant, she raised Jake on her own and never told him the truth about his father. Sam listens, his mind racing. He can't believe that the man who refused to help Jake is his own father. "Does Dr. Thompson know about Jake?" Sam asks. Mrs. Andrews shakes her head. "No, I never told him. He doesn't know the boy he turned away today is his son." The room fills with silence as the weight of the truth sinks in. Sam clenches his fists, anger and disbelief filling his heart. "He needs to know," Sam says firmly. Mrs. Andrews nods, her face determined. Together, they decide to confront Dr. Thompson and make him face the truth. Years ago, Dr. Thompson was a young medical student. He was passionate, ambitious, and determined to succeed. During his internship, he met a beautiful and kind African nurse named Grace. She was hardworking and always treated her patients with care and love. At first, Dr. Thompson barely noticed her, but as they worked together, he started to admire her kindness and intelligence. Slowly, their friendship grew into something more. Grace and Dr. Thompson began spending time together outside of work. They laughed, shared stories, and dreamed about the future. Grace brought out a softer side of him, a side he didn't show to many people. Despite their different backgrounds, they fell deeply in love. Grace believed their love could overcome anything, but not everyone was happy about their relationship. Dr. Thompson's friends and family disapproved. They warned him about the consequences of being with someone like Grace. His parents were especially harsh. "What will people think? You're ruining your future," they told him. At first, Dr. Thompson defended Grace. He told himself their love was strong enough to handle the pressure. However, everything changed when Grace told him she was pregnant. Dr. Thompson was shocked. He wasn't ready to be a father, especially not under these circumstances. His parents were furious when they found out. They pressured him to leave Grace and focus on his career. Slowly, their words started to influence him. Dr. Thompson became distant. He avoided Grace, giving excuses about being too busy with work. Grace tried to hold on, hoping he would come around, but one day he ended it. He told her, "I can't do this anymore. This isn't the life I want." Grace begged him to stay, but his mind was made up. He left without looking back. Dr. Thompson buried himself in his work, trying to forget Grace and the child he never met. Over the years, he became a successful doctor. But deep inside, a part of him always wondered what might have been. He pushed those thoughts away, convincing himself he had made the right choice. Meanwhile, Grace raised their son, Jake, alone. She never contacted Dr. Thompson again. She didn't want to beg for his help or force him to be a father. She poured all her love into Jake, who grew up kind and strong, just like her. Now, years later, the truth is about to catch up with Dr. Thompson. The son he abandoned is the same boy he refused to help. The past he thought was buried is coming back to change his life forever. The next day, Dr. Thompson is in his office going through some files. His mind is still busy with the events from the emergency room. He keeps replaying the moment when he refused to treat Jake. He tries to push away the guilt, but it lingers. Suddenly, there is a knock at his door. He looks up, surprised to see Mrs. Andrews standing in the doorway, her eyes full of determination. "Dr. Thompson, we need to talk," she says firmly. Her voice is calm, but there's an undeniable strength in it. Dr. Thompson hesitates, unsure of what to say. He invites her in, but his body feels tense. "What is it, Mrs. Andrews?" he asks, trying to sound professional, though his heart is racing. Without warning, Mrs. Andrews walks into the room and shuts the door behind her. She takes a deep breath and looks him straight in the eye. "Jake is your son," she says quietly, her words hanging in the air. Dr. Thompson freezes. His mouth goes dry. For a moment, he doesn't know how to respond. "What? What are you talking about?" he stammers, trying to keep his composure. Mrs. Andrews steps closer, her eyes never leaving his. "Jake is your son. You had no idea, did you?" She explains everything, starting from their relationship years ago. She tells him how she tried to reach out to him when she was pregnant, but never heard from him again. She tells him how she raised Jake alone, giving him all the love and care he needed. She says that she never told Jake the truth, wanting to protect him from the pain of being abandoned by his father. Dr. Thompson feels like the world is crashing down around him. He never imagined that the boy he had turned away just a day ago was his own flesh and blood. His mind races, but he can't find the right words. He tries to deny it, but deep down, he knows it's true. Mrs. Andrews watches him closely, waiting for his reaction. "Why didn't you come to me sooner?" Dr. Thompson finally asks, his voice shaking with regret. Mrs. Andrews answers simply, "Because I never wanted Jake to know. I never wanted him to feel the pain of being rejected by his own father. But now he deserves to know the truth." The weight of his past mistakes begins to crush him. He thought he had buried his past, but it's all coming back to haunt him. He stands there, speechless, his mind struggling to accept what he's just learned. Mrs. Andrews doesn't wait for his apology. She's not here for him to make excuses. "You can make it right," she says softly. "You can start by treating Jake like your son. He deserves that." Dr. Thompson finally looks down, ashamed. For the first time, he sees the truth clearly. The pain he caused, the child he abandoned, and the father he could have been. "I'm sorry," he whispers, though he knows it's not enough. Mrs. Andrews gives him one last look before turning to leave. "I hope you'll do better," she says, her voice firm but kind. As she walks out of the room, Dr. Thompson stands there, alone with the truth, feeling like he's lost everything. The man he thought he was is gone. Now, he must face the man he needs to become. Dr. Thompson spends the rest of the day in a daze. He can't stop thinking about what Mrs. Andrews told him. His mind keeps flashing back to the day he left Grace, the day he chose his career over his family. He remembers the look in her eyes when he told her it was over. He remembers walking away, thinking he was making the right choice. But now, everything feels different. That night, Dr. Thompson can't sleep. He lies awake in his bed, staring at the ceiling. He thinks about Jake, the boy he turned away in the emergency room, not knowing he was his son. He feels deep regret in his heart. The guilt is overwhelming. How could he have been so cold? How could he have forgotten the woman he loved and the child he created? The next morning, Dr. Thompson makes a decision. He cannot live with himself anymore, not like this. He needs to make things right, not just for Jake, but for himself. He knows that he can't undo the past, but he can try to make up for it. He needs to stop hiding behind his career. Stop pretending that his actions don't have consequences. Dr. Thompson goes to the hospital early before his shift starts. He finds Sam, who is sitting in the waiting room, looking tired and worried. Dr. Thompson walks up to him, his heart pounding. "Sam," he says, his voice steady but filled with regret, "I need to talk to you about Jake." Sam looks up, surprised to see Dr. Thompson there. "What do you want?" he asks, still upset about how the doctor treated Jake the day before. Dr. Thompson takes a deep breath. I've made a huge mistake. Jake is my son. I didn't know it at the time, but I know now. I'm sorry for what I did." Sam's eyes widen. He stands up, looking at Dr. Thompson with a mix of disbelief and anger. "You're his father. You turned him away like that, and now you're just saying sorry?" Dr. Thompson lowers his head, ashamed. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have treated him that way. I was selfish, and I regret it. I want to make things right." Sam doesn't say anything for a moment. Then he nods, though his expression is still hard. "It's not up to me," he says quietly, "but you should tell Jake. He deserves to know the truth."
Dr. Thompson agrees. He knows he has to face Jake now, no matter how hard it is. He has to tell him that he is his father, even if it's too late to change the past. He understands that Jake may never forgive him, but he's ready to try. As Dr. Thompson walks toward Jake's hospital room, his heart beats faster. He doesn't know what to expect. He doesn't know if Jake will want to see him or hear what he has to say, but he knows this is the only way to begin the healing process for both of them. He has spent so many years running from the truth. Now it's time to face it. This is his chance to change. This is his turning point. Dr. Thompson stands outside Jake's room, his heart pounding. He takes a deep breath before slowly pushing the door open. Inside, Jake is sitting up in bed, his eyes still tired from the night before. When he sees Dr. Thompson, he stiffens, unsure of what to expect. Dr. Thompson stands there for a moment, unsure of how to start. The weight of everything he has done presses on him. "Jake," he says softly, his voice shaky. "I need to talk to you. I owe you an apology." Jake looks at him, confused. "What are you talking about?" he asks, his voice still hoarse. Dr. Thompson walks closer, sitting down in the chair beside the bed. I didn't know it before, but now I do. I am your father, Jake." Jake's eyes widen in disbelief. "What?" he says, his voice trembling. "That can't be true. You're the doctor who turned me away. You're the one who left me, without even helping me when I needed you." Dr. Thompson looks down, filled with guilt. "I know. I made a terrible mistake. I was selfish, and I wasn't ready to be a father. I left your mother when I should have stayed. I never should have abandoned you." His voice cracks as he speaks. "But I've been running from the truth for too long. Now I'm here, and I want to make things right." Jake doesn't know what to say. He has spent so many years wondering about his father, about why he wasn't there. He has felt anger and pain, but now, hearing this man say these words, he's unsure of how to feel. "How can I believe you?" Jake asks, his voice filled with hurt. "How can I trust you after everything?" Dr. Thompson takes a deep breath, looking directly at Jake. "I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't deserve it, but I promise you, I'm here now. I want to be a part of your life, if you'll let me." The room falls silent as Jake processes the words. His emotions are mixed: anger, confusion, and a small spark of hope. After a long pause, he finally speaks. "I don't know if I can forgive you, but I don't want to hate you forever. I need time." Dr. Thompson nods, understanding. "I'll wait as long as it takes. I'll prove to you that I can be the father you deserve." There is a long moment of silence before Jake speaks again, his voice quieter now. "It's going to take time," he says, "but I think we can try." Dr. Thompson smiles, relief flooding through him. It's not a perfect moment. There's still so much pain, so many years lost, but it's a start. It's the beginning of something new. Dr. Thompson stands up and walks to the door, but before he leaves, he turns back to Jake. "Thank you," he says quietly. "Thank you for giving me a chance." Jake looks at him, nodding slightly. "I'll think about it," he says. As Dr. Thompson walks out of the room, he feels a sense of peace he hasn't known in years. He has started the long road to redemption, and though it will be difficult, he is determined to keep moving forward. He knows it won't be easy, but he also knows that forgiveness isn't something you can rush. It's something that takes time, trust, and effort. But for the first time in a long while, Dr. Thompson believes that he can be the man, and the father, he should have been all along. Weeks pass, and Dr. Thompson works hard to prove that he's serious about being a better person and a better father. He shows up at the hospital every day, not just as a doctor, but as someone who wants to make amends. He spends time with Jake, doing small things to show he cares, talking to him about school, asking about his dreams, and just listening when Jake needs to talk. They don't talk about the past much, but there's a quiet understanding between them that things are slowly changing. One afternoon, Dr. Thompson invites Jake to lunch. It's a small gesture, but it's a big step for both of them. They sit at a quiet table in a local cafe, eating simple food. The conversation is light at first, nothing too deep, but as they talk, something shifts. Dr. Thompson shares a story from his childhood, and Jake listens, genuinely interested. For the first time, Dr. Thompson feels like they're connecting, not just as father and son, but as two people who are learning to trust each other. As they finish their meal, Jake looks at him with a small smile. "You know," he says, "I think I'm starting to believe you." Dr. Thompson's heart swells with emotion. It's not forgiveness yet, but it's a sign of progress. It's a sign that Jake is opening up, just a little. That evening, Dr. Thompson returns to the hospital for his shift, but this time it feels different. He's no longer weighed down by guilt or shame. He's no longer running from his past. He's facing it, taking responsibility, and trying to do better. When he walks into the emergency room, he sees the faces of his colleagues and patients. He feels more connected to them now, too, in a way he never did before. He's not just a doctor anymore. He's someone who's learning to be more human. Dr. Thompson spends the rest of the night working with more care and compassion. He takes a little extra time with each patient, making sure they feel heard and understood. It's not about being perfect. It's about showing up and doing his best. He knows there will be hard days ahead, but he's willing to face them. At the end of his shift, Dr. Thompson steps outside into the quiet night. He looks up at the stars and takes a deep breath, feeling a sense of peace. He hasn't fixed everything, and maybe he never will, but he's on the right path now. He knows that redemption isn't something you earn overnight. It's something you build over time, through actions, not just words. As he walks home, he pulls out his phone and sends Jake a message. "I'm proud of how far we've come. Let's keep moving forward, together." He hits send, feeling a quiet hope for the future. The camera lingers on Dr. Thompson as he walks down the street, his steps steady and sure. The weight of his past is still there, but it no longer holds him back. He's made mistakes, but he's learning from them. And with each step forward, he's building a new life, one that's full of possibility, forgiveness, and hope. We hope you enjoyed this story and learned a new lesson from this video. For more related content, please subscribe our channel and don't forget to like, share, and comment. Thanks for watching.